businesses here, work here, and visit here to enjoy our city. Be with us, we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice.
All right, thank you. So we'll let the minutes reflect Councilman Clondaris is absent. I know he did tell me at the last meeting he was not going to be here tonight, and Councilwoman Dobbins is joining us remotely. So number one, we will take roll call votes the whole evening, and we have 6 voting members, and it will require 4 votes to take any action on any of the items. Majority of 4. All right, welcome to all our visitors coming out on a chilly night. Let's start with the approval of the minutes from October 5th. Lynn, I did have an edit that I think we should make. It's down on the very last ordinance amending stormwater utility rates and charges. This was kind of our introduction, and the last sentence says the rates will be phased in starting January 1 through January 1, 2025. No action was taken on this matter. I think we should put in, if approved, comma, the rates will be phased in starting, because we didn't take any action. There was no, to me, indication that we voted in. This kind of makes it sound like that the rates will be phased in. So I would ask that you just insert, if approved, comma, the rates will be phased in starting January 1st.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else?
I move to approve as amended.
Motion by Councilman Gross. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Second by Josh Finch. All right. We'll do a roll call vote. Cindy Dobbins.
Aye. Aye.
Uh-oh.
Diane Quantz.
Yes.
Jeff Gross.
Yes.
Jerry Frush.
Yes.
Josh Finch.
Yes.
Jack Wilhite.
Aye.
All right. Thanks. Cindy, are you using a computer audio and a telephone, or just one audio device? There's Cindy. There you go.
I'll get off my phone.
Yeah, just make
Yeah.
sure one of the devices is muted, because we're getting some feedback. All right, you want to try it now, unmute, and just make sure we can hear you?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Hear me now?
Uh-oh, yes. Cindy, go ahead and hang your phone up if you could, because we're getting, there you go. All right, let's see how that works. All right, let's move into reports, oral and written communications. Just a reminder, on November 4th, at 4 o'clock here, we will be meeting with representatives from Baker Tilly and going through in detail the organizational review. So that meeting's been set up. I assume you have it all on your calendars, and we'll see you then. Just a reminder tonight about that. And then the next item is just basically the September fund report. Are there any questions, or Lynn, any comments on that?
I don't have any comments.
Questions? Okay. All right, then let's move into unfinished business. Ordinance 2020-10-3 as the second reading to amend the 2021 salary ordinance, creating the position of Director of Community Development. And we had a pretty robust discussion at the last meeting about that. I trust that you've all had your questions addressed, and we'll take time here on second reading to answer any further questions or clarifications? If not, I'd ask that we take action on ordinance 2020-1003. Questions?
Mr. Mayor, if there are no questions, I would move that we accept ordinance 2020-1003.
Motion by Councilman Wilhite. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Gross. We'll do a roll call vote. Councilor Dobbins? Cindy, can you hear us?
Yes, I was in trouble unmuting my mic. I vote aye.
Thank you. Councilor Quantz?
Aye.
Councilman Gross?
Aye.
Councilman Frush?
Aye.
Councilman Finch?
Aye.
Councilman Wilhite?
Aye.
All right. Thank you all. The ordinance passes 6-0 on second reading. All right. Let's move into new business tonight. Tonight, we're going to, at the last meeting, we introduced stormwater utility rate and charges, ordinance 2020-1002. Tonight, we will go through, present, and we'll ask for a vote if you're comfortable on first reading. Again, this will require 2 readings, and the second hearing will be a public hearing that could occur at our next meeting or anywhere beyond there. So with that being said, Alex Hilt is joining us from Baker Tilly tonight. Baker Tilly is who has prepared the ordinance and has looked at the ordinance as far as how it pertains to our previous ordinance and how it compares to other ordinances in other communities within our community. And in the presentation of this ordinance, they will be responsible for as far as the details. I've got a short PowerPoint presentation that I want to start with, and then I will have Ryan Workman come up, our stormwater coordinator, and he's got some more discussion probably to add to from the last month, and then we can start our questioning. Brian, I don't know, do you have any comments or just here to answer questions?
I don't have any official comments.
Okay. All right. So let me hook up my presentation. Okay. So what I thought I'd do is talk just a little bit about the history of the utility and the rates. We've only established this rate. We've never raised the rate. We've never adjusted the rate. So I think it's important, this still being relatively new, that everybody understand how this utility was formed, why it was formed, how we established the original rate, where it has brought us to this point. And then I think Ryan's going to come up and tell us where we need to go. So let's start with the history of the utility and rates. Our Warsaw Municipal Stormwater Utility is rooted in the Federal Clean Water Act that began way back in 1972 and has gradually worked its way into communities our size. It took many years for that to happen, but this is essentially, the roots of this are in our Clean Water Act. So obviously that's an EPA organization from 1972 that Clean Water Act was presented and passed, and that Clean Water Act is now regulated and by the EPA and enforced in the state of Indiana by IDEM. So, let's see. So the first nomenclature that we have to get over is MS4. What is MS4? What does that mean? MS4 simply stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. And that designation is a mandated designation in 1999 from the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Phase 2 stormwater program. And at that time, it identified larger communities, and through this whole Clean Water Act, as it's been evolving to eliminate pollution, it's worked its way down to smaller communities. The Indiana Department of Environmental Management initiated the Stormwater Phase 2 program in 2003. And by virtue of our population, the City of Warsaw was mandated to comply with the rules of an MS4 community. So as a result, we've worked towards just designating as an MS4 community is the beginning. There was a lot of work that was done with the previous stormwater coordinator, with our city engineer, working towards meeting the requirements of the stormwater of an MS4 community. And our stormwater utility was established in 2013. So as an MS4 community, our municipal storm utility is directly responsible for federally mandated stormwater regulatory requirements through the development of stormwater quality control measures. So these environmental rules handed down by the EPA, administered by IDEM, again, are mandated for MS4 communities, and it's a very rigid set of guidelines, and stormwater control, quality control measures are the heart of what the stormwater utility is required to do. And we do a lot more things, but maintaining these rules and regulations, keeping our permit is a big part of the utility. And I think that's the thing that people need to understand is we're not just dealing with the infrastructure and capital projects. There's a significant amount of money that's required for us to basically take care of our utility by meeting these rules and regulations. And what I thought I'd do is just go through quickly the stormwater control measures that we're responsible for. So the first one is public education and outreach. And actually the first two, public participation and involvement. We're fortunate that with Lily Lakes and Streams here, we've got a wonderful resource to be able to get out and educate the public, to create the outreach, and to create participating of our community into the stormwater utility. So, but that's not cheap and it's not free. We do pay for those services. The third is illicit discharge detection and elimination. That probably doesn't need to be explained. This is a way to try and keep the, as our city engineer says, the yuckies out of the lake. And I think that's a big part of the job, is to make sure that the pollutants aren't getting into their system and getting out into our water supply. Certainly during construction, we're charged with maintaining rules and regulations and enforcement of erosion control. And so during construction, that runoff is important. And then equally important is post-construction, where's the water going to go? You know, somebody comes in and builds something, and there has to be engineering and planning into where the runoff is headed. And infrastructure has to be improved by the developer and or the city, or both, to handle that post-construction runoff. And then the last is pollution prevention and good housekeeping within the city. The city complies with a lot of the best practices to, again, keep the runoff, the pollutant runoff from getting down into the storm system. So those control measures are important, and in order, again, to comply and to be able to operate our utility, maintain our permit as a utility, When we established our utility, we established our fee back in 2013, late 2013. So the first thing that our utility fee funds are these mandated stormwater quality control measures, as well as all the other stormwater regulatory requirements. And I know Ryan can answer more particular questions about that, but again, just the massive amount of regulation that's mandated and that changes and comes up are a part of the resources, the use of our resources for the utility. The second and probably most critical is just maintaining our infrastructure, the ongoing maintenance of our pipes, of our conveyances, our swales, our ditches, our the water gardens, and anything we can do to try and improve that drainage and keep that drainage free from pollution, that infrastructure maintenance, that system of pipes that are underground that mostly we don't see. That's another portion of the utility that is, those funds are quite necessary for. And the final three legs of the stool are capital improvements. These are the very large, expensive, very numerous projects that as a community with over 100 lakes in the county and high water tables and uneven soil types, and you know, we just literally don't have a shortage of projects. And those are the projects, that's really the crux of what we're trying to do is establish and adjust the fee so that we can get some of these projects done. And I know Ryan's going to get into more details about that. But let's see. So I want to go back to our current fee that was established in 2013. There are two components to the fee. The first is the base rate, and this is again for residential. It's $1.05 a month, and then the impervious surface charge is $1.90 a month for a total of $2.95 a month. So for all of our residential units, this is a flat rate. It's just not practical to go out and measure every single house, roof line, and driveway. It makes, best practices are that you do a sample and come up with an average, and then you use that average. And was that, Ryan, is it like 3,300 square feet?
It's 3,500.
3,500 square feet of impervious surface. So that's the amount of runoff an average residential unit is responsible for in the community according to our rate structure. It's important to note that we apply the same rate to all residential units, be it a single-family dwelling or a multifamily dwelling unit. All the rates are the same. All residential units are charged the same flat amount. And again, this is our current rate. And as we move ahead, our structure will remain the same. We are not changing any of that as we move ahead. So I just wanted to show this graph from 2012. Back then, UMBAH had done a statewide study as far as where the local stormwater monthly rates are. And you can kind of see right in here is the $2.95 for the city of Warsaw. This ranges, municipalities in Indiana range from $1 a month all the way up to $12.40 a month. Now, this was 8 years ago, but that was where we started off. So that's where we're at. We certainly are here because of the amount of projects that we need to get done. We cannot sustain our utility and do the improvements that are critical in our community at that $2.95. But again, just a little history. That's where we started out. Again, just to just for review, $1.05 is the base rate. Everybody pays the base rate, and then everybody with the residential unit pays an extra $1.90 for a total of $2.95 a month. The current commercial rate structure, in the base rate, I believe, is based on the number of, Ryan, is there like a commercial would pay, some would pay more than one base rate, and I don't remember what the base rate, how many base rates, what determines how many base rates a commercial entity pays.
The base rate is attached to a account with wastewater. So if, for instance, you have multiple buildings, they have multiple accounts, then they have that extra 105.
All right. So then that's their base rate, but the majority of their fee will come from that equivalent runoff unit, that 3,500 square feet. So if a business has 7,000 square feet, they will be charged 2 ERUs. So they would pay $3.80 for the 7,000 square feet of runoff, where, again, the 1 ERU is equal to 3,500 square feet. So that's how the commercial rate structure was established, and how it will, that formula will continue that way as we move ahead. So again, it's the base rate plus the number of ERUs on that commercial property. So just a couple notes here. Let me go back to this one first. So we've got a financial management report from Baker Tilly that we just distributed for the first 6 months of 2020, and I'll just read in the executive summary what was stated. It said, based on the current assumptions, the current schedule of rates and charges is adequate to generate revenues to operate the utility, but is inadequate to invest in the current amount of capital budgeted over the next 5 years. So the rate essentially can handle the operational side of the utility, but it's the cost of the capital projects that are causing the problems, causing us to back up and looking that we can't meet our capital improvement plan based on where we're at right now. And I know, Ryan, you've passed some information out to the council to give an idea of where we're lagging behind, but that in essence comes from our financial report, and that's essentially where we're at. One other thing, let's see. Oh, the current financial report also states that, that graph I showed you was from 2012. The current state average of 121 Hoosier municipalities, their monthly stormwater rate is $5.62 per month. So that's the average of 121 Hoosier communities. And obviously the city current rate is $2.95 per month. So that just kind of, I think, tees this up to look at why we need to look to adjust our rate. And we'll have Ryan come and talk a little bit about that, talk about where we stand, and more importantly, look at our needs as we move ahead. So, Ryan? Are there any questions from my slides before I kind of switch over here? All right, Ryan?
Yeah, so as Mayor Tummer had just kind of outlined for you guys right there, when it comes to the mandated expectations from federal to state top-down regulations, then as well as with that we have those stormwater quality control measures, and then we have our capital improvement projects aside from also those operations and maintenance. And the stresses that we receive typically on our budget or our annual budget is predominantly on our operations and maintenance, as well as those capital improvement projects. As Mayor Tallmer had outlined for us for the history of stormwater utility, the previous MS4 or stormwater coordinator was working in tandem with James Emmons, the city engineer, to get us into compliance. And with that, we had to get a lot of the administrative or the program set in for our stormwater quality control measures. And so we have that pretty well down. However, as we grew and as we got into compliance, we recognized that the utility, when it comes to operations and maintenance and repairs for our collection systems, as well as the projects that we have, the more and more that we got educated in an understanding of the stormwater systems we have in the city of Warsaw, we saw a greater and greater need. And the more that we get into our actual stormwater lines or our collection system with video feed, we can see more and more of the inadequacies or the problems that we need to address with those costs. So just as Mayor Tomer alluded to, that report that we just received from Baker Tilly, just a few facts as well. Within the past 3 years, our operations and maintenance disbursements have gone up increasingly. So that's just a trend that we are seeing. In some years it's exponential versus climbing other years. And then when it comes to the total of operating disbursements for our operations and maintenance, predominantly it falls into two appropriations, about 40 to 70% within those 3 years. And that's going to be our professional services, where we do work with Baker Tilly for administrative studies like this past one with the rates, as well as Christopher Burke Engineering to alleviate some of the work when it comes to administrative expectations that we have to do for the state, whether that's trainings or if that's updating our documentation that we need to provide. So for instance, that last quality control measure, the municipal good housekeeping and pollution prevention, essentially the state is interacting as if they are working with an industry. Each department we have is a facility, and we need to make sure that we keep all of our products, byproducts, and materials on site. And we need to have a plan that shows that. So this past year, we updated all those plans. So that would be considered an administrative cost that we usually outsource to an engineering firm, just due to time when it comes to resources as well. And then also, even just looking at this current year, when it comes to that report, we were about $50,000 over on our professional services because of capital projects that we are completing. As well as our capital improvement projects is over around 50K as well, which is about 75 above what we had originally intended, just due to the projects that we have either identified or worked with the timeline. So just as Mayor Tolmer had outlined for us, those three needs, those three reasons is why we have a utility as well as a financial or a funding mechanism to keep us afloat and keep us moving. You have the regulations, which we caught up with compliance with our past MS4, stormwater coordinator and the engineer, and then we have our collection system or our operations and maintenance and repairs, which we haven't identified of all of the issues that we may have. Or the unforeseens, as James would suggest as well, when we do have an issue that just pops up out of nowhere. And then also finally our capital improvement projects, ones that we have identified and we track out, we plan for within the next 5 years, which those typically have a large impact because those are large cost dollar projects. So just to briefly go through what we have planned for next year, we have 3 major projects that we are going to be actually, from the draft that James and I had gone through, we have 4 major projects that we're going to be going through. And one of them is directly in tandem with the town of Winona when they are addressing that roundabout. We have 3 different stormwater infrastructure projects that we're going to be doing. Since they're going to be already working on that, we are going to be able to get onto the subsurface and update the stormwater collection system or infrastructure there as well. Northside Winona is notorious for having a lot of runoff, and it is an issue that we need to address. So we will be addressing that when it comes to water quality measures for that area. And as well as this, we have Pike Lake as well as Kelly Park Pond restoration projects. So those would be more of a quality, stormwater quality project versus a quantity. while it still is managing stormwater on-site as well as allowing it to run off appropriately, getting those natural mechanisms of infiltration and percolation to occur. Those are large cost dollar projects as well. So those projects in total are going to amount to close to, I would say, $1.4 million. So these are the years of, or those are the dollars of projects you're going to be seeing in the future for us trying to, whether we recognize them, we identify them, we put them on the backlog until we're able to, or we just can get them done with the rates. So again, just to reinforce those 3 reasons as to why the rates need to be addressed, we have been under the state average. The Water Environment Federation did a study 2 years ago, and within our region of EPA, Region 5, within municipalities that are close to our population, as well as impact for storm infrastructure, it was determined that $1.5 million of operating budget is what is needed to operate a utility, to operate a program of this magnitude for this population and footprint. We are looking to get to that point. However, we want to make it staggered. So, but again, we are still under the state average, and we do see the stress within our operating budget. So, I don't know if there's any questions, or if you want me to outline a little bit, go through the rate structure, how we're doing it, kind of 2 tiers, the initial year change and then the progression.
Are there any questions with regards to, I know you had sent out a capital project 5-year projection, and, you know, just generally, it was like $5.4 million over the next 5 years, so roughly looking at just a little under $1.1 million per year of capital improvement projects. And that doesn't count the ones that all of a sudden, as James talks about, just popping up, and that probably will alter this landscape, because as those projects come up, sometimes it's like pulling a thread on a ham, and all of a sudden you got a big problem.
Yeah.
So that's another uncertainty, that we've got to keep our reserves up to the point where they can handle those types of projects. So questions on any of what we've discussed to this point, the history, the original rate, where we stand now. I know Ryan will go through what the proposal is. We're looking at stair-stepping this in for the next 5 years to try and make it a little bit easier for everyone. But again, I think where we're at now with the low rate that we've got to make the right move now, and we've got to make a move that's going to allow us to get these things done, because right now we just can't. I think, what do we raise in a year right now from the utility? Isn't it around 400,000 revenue?
The receipts, let me get annual.
This is Alex Hilt from Baker Tilly.
Yeah, I was just trying to pull up the annual number. Okay.
Looks like it's just under 300,000 for the first 6 months.
Yeah.
So it's about probably somewhere just under
Yeah, so it's
600,000.
just under 600,000 for the for 2019. Looks like we were at a little over 500,000 for 2017 and 2018.
So again, with approximate double that budget for the capital projects, again, that gives you an idea where a lot of the stress is on this budget. Thanks, Alex.
Well, Joe, I've seen these guys working down there behind my house along the lake, cleaning out all this sewer lines and stuff. They spent hours and hours down there photographing and boring, cutting all these roots out. That takes a lot of money, and, you know, we need to support that.
Thank you, Jerry. I know that the projects, I know we really have, the last few years, we've been really focusing on the southern edge of the community, and we've spent roughly how much down there over the last 3 years on those projects?
It was upwards to $1 million. It was within 2 phases. We had phase 1.
Total dollar amount that I've been spent. We're getting ready to culminate that whole area and return Kelly Pond back to a fishable pond and improve that park.
Yeah, 'cause just when it comes to that management, and then also to kind of bounce off of what Jerry had just mentioned with that project where we're boring and we did the root cutting through that Center Lake pipe. I never experienced it because it was on my back end, and also when I first got into this, I was just primarily in the office. But before we did that work, Center Lake Park was essentially just a pool that anybody could really swim in. It was always soggy, or else once we had a rain event, we had a few inches of water up there. So ever since then, it's kept draining. So it's the dynamic between you cannot really see what's occurring below underground, but then you can see the impact when it comes to the facilities, as well as the accessibility that the citizens or residents have in the area too.
I think that's an important point too, when we're looking at the projects. It might seem like, well, why do we need a fishing pond? Why are we charging people for that? Or why do we need to improve the shoreline? But those are, both projects are directly the result of the fact that we have a lot of water running into that area. And it's causing a problem in that area. And as we improve and move that water out of the residential area, that water's got to go somewhere. And we can either create in Kelly Park a swamp, or get that pond dredged out and get the water held in that area. And then the same with Pike Lake. We have a lot of runoff coming down from the older neighborhoods up the Fort Wayne, Maine, Clark, Sheridan, running down into that shoreline. And I just provided Ryan this week with a study that we just had done of the lake and the depths, and it's showing exactly where we have stormwater coming in, that it's filling up with silt and taking away the shoreline and making it an unusable swamp area along there. So we are, the projects that we're doing will, yes, look beautiful, and yes, improve the parks, but they're actually dealing with the stormwater and where it's going and the effects that it's having. So I think that's an important thing to bring up, that it's both, yes, a beautification and returning that to a recreational use, but it's claiming it back from what it was before we had so much habitation and so much running out into that area.
Thank you, Diane. Brian?
I just maybe wanted to point out maybe a couple of the obvious, but Warsaw is a little bit of a unique situation if you look around the state. Many of your MS4 communities are grouped together. So you take that South Bend area, Goshen, Elkhart, South Bend, the entire county is all part, and they have formed one MS4 community. You have something similar to that down in the Lafayette, West Lafayette area. So, but Warsaw, we stand alone, and Kosciuszko is the only MS4 in the county. So we're required to do those 6 minimum control measures that the mayor had talked about, and we're required to, or we're not required to, but we're trying to do many of these stormwater improvements, some of these drainage issues. We've dealt with many drainage issues around the area, and people call all the time. There's many more to deal with, but we are the lone community trying to handle the entire stormwater system. But we also partner with other groups. So if you were to look at a topo map, Warsaw is kind of the bottom of a bowl when you look at the topo lines. But we're working with the Watershed Foundation, who's working out in the county, trying to improve that water drainage and that flow and control some of that water. We work with the Lilly Foundation, with Grace College, and trying to help supplement some of our public education outreach, public participation. So we're looking for ways to maximize those dollars that we can partner with people, even though they're not part of the MS4 per se. There are organizations doing what we need to do, so we look to partner with them and bolster their operation. So I just wanted to point a couple of those things out. You know, we're a smaller, mid-sized community, three public lakes within our borders that we try and keep clean and try and protect for the citizens. That was all.
Thanks, Brian. Others?
Yeah, if I could get a little bit better understanding here, I appreciate Councilwoman Quantz's input on the what we might say is the more practical side of this. As I understand it, we have water draining in from other areas within the city, residential areas. It drains into Kelly Park, it drains into Pike Lake. Along with it, it brings all the unused, say, fertilizer that we put on our lawns and all sorts of things. And tell me, please tell me if I'm wrong, but if we don't do something, then all that drainage starts to get stopped or slows down because of sediment in Kelly Park?
Yes, so think of it as, at least in the case of Kelly Park Pond, think of it in the case of you have a fishbowl and you fill it all with sand, you're losing the amount of volume that you can retain or hold water, or even space when it comes to this. When it comes to our collection system, that also has an impact. I mean, referencing what Jerry had mentioned with the Center Lake pipe, that was a scenario that actually occurs more often than you would think within the brackets of those storm pipes. And there's a lot of factors that can either do blockages, just like with the tippy that we have on our northwestern side. If there are a lot of log jams, that affects the flow of the water. But when you're alluding to sediment as well as nutrients, those have different types of impacts to our natural resources we have here. And essentially, we kind of accelerate the process of aging a lake, which we have a small case scenario here with Kelly Park Pond, where I keep hearing stories when that was fishable, but now it's hypoxic. There's hardly any oxygen in there. Maybe a few times I see a heron trying to hunt for something, but that's probably pretty infrequent, being that there's probably not a lot of dissolved oxygen in that water body. But ultimately, when it comes to stormwater management, you want to manage it on site. Once it leaves the site, then it's going to have an impact, whether if it's through volume or if it's through water quality components to that, as well as managing what it can pick up as it runs off, like sediment and nutrients. And that has different impacts from different types of scenarios, whether if it's single-family residential or if it's industrial or if it's even a city department. They have different implications and different factors, but ultimately impacts our drainage. And that's probably our biggest concern when it comes to stormwater management, as well as water quality.
And so if left unchecked, what would be the result of that? Maybe years after I'm gone, but what would be the...
Well, left unchecked, the more and more that we develop as a city, that just means that we're going to continuously increase in impervious surface. So that means a higher frequency and volume and runoff on water, so a higher volume of that runoff. With those systems being whether plugged up or inadequate, then that's going to cause a lot of erosion within our Outer Banks, as well as more flooding issues, whether if it's at a residential home or if it's at a facility where their retention pond isn't draining. There's just a lot of factors in that, but I mean, ultimately you can probably see a lot of flooding issues coming from the Pike as well as Center Lake. Center Lake, we're lucky that it's spring fed and it only has an outflow, but not so lucky with Pike. So just like as Brian alluded to with the Watershed Foundation working at the county scale or the watershed scale, they're managing Deeds Creek, or at least making positive impacts. But ultimately, it would continuously get worse exponentially because, one, we're improving, we're growing as a community. That only means we're increasing in impervious surface. And then if our systems aren't able to manage the current level, then that's just going to get worse. So.
Ryan, do you want to go through the proposed increase, which will be laddered in from 2021 through 2025? So it's like we're averaging about $1 per month per year as we go from 2021 to 2025 as far as the increase.
Yeah, so overall for the ordinance 2020-1002 for the amending of stormwater utility rates and charges, looking at 2021 through 2025, we are trying to incrementally increase the rates to sustain adequate revenue stream and to transition into a revenue stream that allows us to be self-supported. And so with that here, you can see for 2021 through 2025, we have a base rate that's going to be incrementally increasing by 39 cents per year. And then we have a variable rate that's going to be incrementally increasing by 70 cents per year. So beginning, or at least anticipating for January 1st of 2021, we have that initial change, which is the 386, but then following we have 490 for the following year. And then that's going to go up to 593 in 2023. And then 2024, 697. And then 2025, $8. And again, that is to get us to where we're able to complete the operations and maintenance and repairs that we need to comply with, or at least to upkeep with our ever-increasing needs for a collection system, as well as able to change with the regulations top-down from state level that we can foresee that are going to incur within the next 5 years, and higher expectations for our water quality control measures, which means either more outsourcing or more internal time with our current employees that we have. But overall, that's just to where we can become self-support, which will allow offsetting some dollars that we have been, when it comes to operations that we see and we receive from the street department or public works, as well as wastewater utility. Which gets close to at least upwards of $700,000 plus, which we are utilizing from them, whether if it's salary and wages using the wastewater treatment's lab, as well as myself being paid through wastewater treatment. We also have our street sweepers from Public Works Department. So while we pay for the salary and wages for those drivers, that is 100% for management of our stormwater collection system, comes from street department or Public Works. So being able to offset those costs with the current financial mechanism that we have is something that we're striving for to get to at 2025. So that would be how we're staggering it to get to the place that we need to be, as opposed to just stamping it down and saying, we need to be here now, let's get there now. We've been able to, through partnerships of local community members, organizations, as well as working well with different departments, we're able to collaborate and get work done in an efficient manner with the current budget we have, but starting to stress, and you can see it's breaking through the cracks. So that's why we're going to be staggering up to get to that $8 point by 2025. At least that's what we're proposing.
So the rate will increase, the base rate will gradually increase, as will the variable rate over time. Correct?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Questions? Alex, I know your recommendation in your 6-month review, your financial report for the first 6 months, talked about, the ability of the utility right now to sustain itself as a utility, but where our big issue comes is the capital improvement projects. Can you talk a little bit about if we don't do this, where we end up as far as, with about a $1.1 million budget per year, capital projects, where do we end up if we don't make a move?
Yeah, I think what Ryan was just hitting on is really key to that. The costs of the utility have traditionally been much higher than what has been covered by the stormwater rates themselves. But that shortfall has always been, it's been handled through the sewage department, through the street department, through other tax-based funds that are used for the large capital projects of the stormwater utility. So there are, it has, other methods have been used in the past to get things done and to keep the stormwater utility moving forward. And as Ryan said, this plan is to try and wean off of all of that subsidization from other departments within the city and truly attempt to start turning the stormwater utility into its standalone entity that it was really designed to be. But if we were to turn off the taps, if you will, from all the other sources and go with what we have and let the stormwater utility try and make its way, you would deplete your cash reserves within a year or a year and a half if you tried to do all of the capital plans that are out there and that are on the utility's plate. The stormwater utility has worked hard over the last several years to build up a cash reserve. So, as the mayor and as Ryan have pointed out, sometimes big projects come up unexpectedly and they're in a position to be able to tackle them. But, we would reverse that very quickly, if they were actually required to foot the bill for everything that the stormwater really uses. So I think that's one of the really key takeaways of this whole analysis was, what does it really take to make stormwater an independent utility versus, very much requiring subsidization from other funds.
Right, thank you. And that goes along with our comprehensive financial plan, the stress that's being put on the general fund with the annexations and the increased footprint. Obviously, the stormwater utility is going to have that same expansion of service area. And I think Alex made a great point. Being propped up by the street department, utility department is the way this utility started. But it's been on its feet for about six years now, and those other departments are certainly in need of those resources as well. So, this is what the increase is about, not just the capital projects, but also those subsidies from the other departments, primarily street and utility. So, but here we are. I just really feel like we've got a pretty strong case to get something done, but I know we had a group with the council group sit down and look at these rates and have made this proposal. And there's three of them. I know Jack's gone. I think, I'm not sure.
Mike's gone.
I'm the only one here.
Jerry.
And I think is Cindy online?
Cindy, do you have any comments with regards to this proposal from the rate study committee, council rate study committee that's being proposed?
think the thing of concern was the amount of subsidy that is now being received from other departments, in particular street, because we know we have a lot of needs as far as paving roads, keeping the roads in good shape and everything. And so by draining resources from there to help subsidize the stormwater utility, there are other projects that are not getting done. So it's kind of a tit for tat there. And same with, the sewer. We're taking quite a lot of money from there. And I think probably that was one of the big concerns of the committee.
And I know you all worked through this proposed rate structure. There were several that were proposed, and excuse me, this is the one that you all felt would be the most palatable. I know you all, as council members, fought to try and gradually phase this in rather than doing it all at once. And any comments on that?
Well, I can comment on that again. Yes, all the initial figures, I think we were just not comfortable with. We felt that it was going to be a difficult sell and perhaps create a burden on people, and so work until we got it within something that we thought we could phase in over 5 years and have it be reasonable.
All right, thank you. All right, other questions, comments, thoughts? Do you feel comfortable considering this on first reading now? There's no hurry, but obviously it's going to require a public hearing and a second reading, and I think getting, at least hearing how you feel about that now makes a lot of sense, so we can understand what our second reading and the public hearing, if there are things that we maybe need to address, I'd sure like to hear that now.
Well, I know, I sat in on that first meeting when we first tried to get this started going, was that 6, 7 years ago? And I know we really probably should have raised it a little higher at that point in time, but we didn't want to scare everybody to death right at the very get-go. But it is necessary that we keep up these lines and so on. Of course, like I live right there on Center Lake, and I see the shoreline gradually eroding away. And I know that if the funds come in sooner or later, you're going to take care of that problem and help it out. And that's what we need. You keep washing all that dirt back in the lake and stuff, that's not good, so.
Jerry, I think you make a good point. You know, when we started out as a new utility, the value of the utility was maybe not as clear as it is now. Having now seen the projects that have come forward and some of the great results that we've got, the importance of the utility is much greater now than maybe the perception was when we started out. And I think I would probably agree with you. We probably started out low, too low, because it was a new utility, and we can't go back and address that now. But we've had 6 years of some pretty low rates that are hamstringing us now as far as getting done a lot of the things I think that we need to get done. So, but that's a good point. I think we probably started out a little bit too low 6 years ago.
Yeah, and we heard complaints at that time. And
Bless you.
but everybody's got they see some of the improvements we've made now, so I don't think it would be quite as hard of a sell.
Again, I think the importance of the projects and the results of the current projects are you're exactly right. I think that's, to me, legitimizing the need for this utility to stand on its own and to be productive.
Yeah, like Ryan said, over there at Central Park, you know, if you had a big rain, why, there's a big mud puddle there, and nowadays you don't see that. So if you're one of those concert goers or something like that, well, you can see that right off the bat. And
You know, you talk a little bit about when this utility started, how we started with maybe a rate that was too low, but I think that reflects the councils that we've had in the past, and this council as well, as being conservative in nature and not willing to jump in beyond what we think something, what is necessary. So, yeah, maybe we're a little hamstrung now, but I think it was probably also a good thing that we did it, or that council did it that way at that time. Now we've got our feet wet, so to speak, no pun intended. And we see a little more clearly what needs to be done.
I think we've also learned from sewage rate to not just set it and then wait 5 or 10 years and reevaluate. And I like this plan that it's phased in, and that we see where we're going, and that everybody can clearly see where we're going, and we're not just doing a knee-jerk every 5 years because, oh no, we're in trouble again, but that we're gradually increasing it. And if we look at the fact that we're only actually increasing it in 5 years to be what we think we need now. So that's extremely conservative. Maybe too conservative even, Jerry, but I don't think that anybody can argue with the fact that we're planning to get where we need to be today, taking 5 years to do it. And, who knows what the situations will be there, but hopefully as we make some of these improvements, we'll see less need for some of the capital projects, because we're taking care of business as we go, rather than letting things get out of hand and deteriorate and then have to do a big, large-scale thing to fix it.
Something else we need to consider, we've spent a lot of time the last few years with the comprehensive financial plan, which allows us to take a look at the pressures on our budget with a couple years of actual data, and then projecting ahead 3 years. We're looking at a 5-year snapshot. And, again, knowing what we know about the property tax caps and the expansion of our footprint, the amount of services, the downward pressure on our revenues over the next several years. One of the recommendations from the comprehensive financial plan this year was to review city fees to ensure they're adequate to recover the costs of providing services. And I can say that we are not supporting that utility and able to recover the costs of providing those services. I think that's really what this is boiling down to. And this is, again, we're having to dip into the street department and the utility department to help offset those costs. That's not good. And this is the opportunity, I think, to, again, in a very measured fashion, in a stepwise fashion, try and take care of that.
Well, I think we're kind of lucky that we can dip into those two, to get some money for this. So, and I know they need that money as bad as anybody else, so.
When something goes down, it's got to come from somewhere, and I know that's a lot of what we deal with stormwater, that's for sure.
We've been pretty lucky this year. We haven't had any big storms.
Yeah. Councilman Gross, you've been rather quiet there. I'm going to pick on you. Known you for a long time.
7 years ago, it was compliance. We have an MS4 hat on our head. What does that mean? Clean Water Act 50 years ago, federal, state guidelines. We now are moving into, okay, how do we make sure we are in compliance and we can keep that hat on our head? That takes you to infrastructure. That takes you to capital projects. And we're no longer just, are we in compliance? We're realizing as we look at growth, development, what's managed growth, good growth, this department is starting to stand on its own 2 feet. And I think the taxpayers might appreciate, instead of going to this department, that department, we're short here, short there, we're starting to separate this and allow this department to stand on its 2 feet and notice all the benefits. Compliance is one thing. No more flooding at Central Park. A little boy can fish at Kelly Park, which there's a lot more going on if a little boy can throw, cast out and catch a fish. There's a lot of good management that is happening there. And then think about all the flooding, and we're always going to have that. You mentioned big storms, but the kids can't play over at Lincoln anymore, big rain event. I mean, it's used to be a lake over there for a day or two. And that's a new school, right? Management and everything that's been going on. This is definitely a step in the right direction. And again, back to the rates, the taxpayers now are going to be able to see what am I being asked to contribute, and where is this going? It also forces us over the next 5 years. It will force us as we continue to evaluate and reevaluate. Are we going to put our money, okay, where our mouth is? And he's going to have to prove it, and then we're going to have to work through that as we represent the community. Constant change. So, a good thing. I'm in support of it. Thanks, Mayor.
All right, Josh, I know I tried to make you, make it as basic as we can as far as the history, because has a lot to do with it, and I know this is your first stab at this, so.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I probably look at it from a little different perspective than you guys do, because you have the history of it, or you were here for the history of it, I guess. But I try to break it down in a simple way of, is it a want or is it a need, right? I don't think it's really, I would identify a want as something that would be nice, but we could put a stopgap to it for a few years until maybe it makes more sense. I think a need is identifying areas where our community is lacking and then resolving it. And this, to me, is a need for our community. We've all said it, less flooding, better quality of life for our lakes, which is used by almost everybody in the community. And it's such an important piece of what we do, not only helping with erosion, but again, the Kelly Park Pond. You know, I'd love to take my boys there and go fishing. I think that'd be really cool. So, you know, it's adding to amenities. It's kind of refreshing some things that were once kind of a shining light and a beacon of light in the community that aren't there now. So by identifying those things and continually increasing the amount of resources we're putting toward those things, we're not going to have to get 40 years down the line and say, oops, we probably should have paid more attention to that. So I think this is a huge need for the community versus a want that would be nice to have but could wait a few more years. I think this is something we need to address now and move forward with.
Thank you. All right.
I'll make a motion that we pass ordinance 2020-1002.
I'd second it.
Motion by Diane, second by Jerry. Any further questions, comments, concerns on ordinance 2020-1002?
Something that is.
Cindy, are you?
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I don't have anything else to say. I just thought you were ready for the question.
Okay, hang on just a sec. Jack's got something to say, then I'll get to you.
Just one last comment, something that Councilman Gross stated that kind of triggered a thought in my mind. This borrowing from other, getting supplements from other departments, in the long run isn't really a very good practice. And in a way, it kind of muddies everything up. Keep coming up with all these, it kind of muddies the water when it comes to what our tax dollars being spent on it. Some of it's going to the street department, some of it's going to wastewater treatment and ends up with stormwater. Some would look at that as kind of a way that hides the real expenditures. And so by making the stormwater utility stand on its own 2 feet, so to speak, I think is a good thing as well.
All right, anyone else? There's a motion on the floor, it's been seconded. I'll start with a roll call vote. Cindy?
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Jerry?
Aye.
Mr. Finch?
Aye.
Josh? And Jack?
Aye.
All right. It passes on first reading, 6-0, and we will be back for the first meeting in November for our public hearing. I believe we've got enough time to advertise that, so we'll hold our public hearing at our next meeting. All right. Ryan, thank you so much for all of your work. I know this is, there's been a lot of thought put into this. Alex, thank you. You don't need to hang around anymore if you don't want. I think we're done for the evening, but we'll certainly want you back in a couple weeks. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Council.
Great.
All right. Let's move on to item number 2 in new business. This is a transfer resolution 2020-1002. This is transferring $10,000 into the CCI from which the project consultant was paid. Josh, or Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. Before you, just as a simple transfer resolution, this is a grant from K21. They generously predominantly funded the majority of this study for a trail system that would go down Country Club Road. That study has been completed. The total study price was around $15,000. They pitched in $10,000, so we're very happy to have their support on this trail project. So right now, what we're doing is we're taking those grant funds and putting them back into the account because this is a reimbursable grant, so we're just moving it back into the account where we paid the consultant from.
Questions?
I move to approve resolution 2020-10-2.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All right. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Cindy?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
All right. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Thanks, Justin. And finally, this is resolution 2020-1003. This is basically taking CARES Act money that has been allocated, and we are being reimbursed for monies that have been spent in the amount of $116,619.69. Lynn, any comments on this transfer resolution?
Yes, if you don't mind me changing that amount on the front to 69 rather than 16.
69 cents?
Yes,
All right.
that will change that.
So Exhibit A shows 116,619.69, and there was a slight error on the resolution itself, so
Probably the
Lynn
typos.
wants to correct that to $116,619.69.
And you'll see several more of these before the end of the year.
If you remember right, we've got around $480,000 of CARES Act money that was allocated to us, and this is what we've spent to date. This has all been approved and paid. We've been reimbursed out of that pot of money from our CARES Act allocation. That money does need to be spent, or the deadline is by the end of the year. So this is money that we've done a lot of testing with. This is probably one of the significant uses of this fund, is our CARES Act COVID testing, and that has not ended yet, although I will say that the Bowen Center has, with the County Health Department, set up a more permanent free testing site, if you will, that's been in action since just last Thursday, and I know they did over 300 patients just in a couple days last week, so they're very busy, and essentially there will be a reduced need for CARES Act funding supported testing with the development and establishment of this clinic. So we'll probably see the end of the CARES Act testing, which is a good thing. Not ready to announce that yet, but that we'll probably phase that out. So, any questions on this? Again, this is CARES Act money that we've been allocated from the federal government to take care of COVID-related expenses. State has been very specific in what they allow and what they don't allow reimbursement for. They've recently revised that, which is going to allow us to utilize those funds for a little bit broader use, and I feel confident that we'll be able to utilize these funds as we get towards the end of the year. So, but this is primarily just a little bit of a cleanup that we've got to take that money and put it into all these different accounts to reimburse them for. So, is there a motion to approve or to consider 2020-1003?
I will,
We approve 2020-1003.
Jack, is that a second? All right. Any further discussion or questions? All right, we'll go through a roll call vote. Cindy?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Jack?
yes.
All right, passes 6-0. Thank you very much.
Mayor, just a question on what you're talking about the testing.
Yes,
Will the Bell Center site have the ability to do mobile sites to our outlying areas? I know one of the things that we've had with the CARES Act testing is being able to do the north and the south. Are we going to still keep that in consideration, that those people may not be able to travel down here to this clinic? Have we thought about that?
yeah, the CARES Act testing, we had the Syracuse Clinic and the Nappanee Clinic. We didn't do much in the Nappanee Clinic at all. I mean, there's other testing available. This is just as CARES Act testing. I know that I've talked to Kirk Carlson, and he understands that need, but they're just trying to get established with what they're doing right now. They're trying to gauge, their demand here. They've got, again, very specific protocol from the State Department of Health to make sure that they can meet. They're being subsidized with all the equipment and training and the reporting software and everything they need. And then they're being subsidized, I believe it's $100,000 for one testing site. And there's a possibility to go to a second testing site, which could potentially be mobile, but I'm not going to speak for them. They have an agreement with the county who is contracting with the state for this. So I'm just kind of looking at it from the CARES Act side and what we've done to this point. They're certainly aware of that. Central testing site may not serve those out in the periphery, but I can't make any real comments on when that may happen. It's a good question, and it has been brought up.
Well, I mean, I know as a city, we're responsible for the city, but it's just a concern of mine.
No, this is a lot broader than the city.
Yeah.
And we've been working well with the county. As you remember, we put $100,000 into the pot, and the county put in, the commissioners put in $200,000, actually had $300,000 to service the entire county for CARES Act testing. So it certainly is a concerted effort, a collaborative effort, and really, really pleased that we don't have to rely on sporadic drive-through testing sites. The state did a marvelous job with those testing sites, but they were only here 6 weeks. And we need a more consistent testing site. So, good question. Anybody else? Any other matters come before the council tonight? Any comments from our visitors, questions? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you.
So it's 8:20, and today, at Military Time, at 2020, 22nd, 2020. Three things to sign, kids.
Today is one? No, today's
No.
That's tomorrow, that's tomorrow we got that.
It's 8 o'clock.
Yeah,
So that's 20.
so tomorrow night.
20 minutes, 20 seconds.